Hello everyone and welcome to Edge Time. Today I wanted to give a brief, hopefully brief, sharpening demonstration here. Just basically get the knowledge of sharpening out to more people. I learned how to sharpen mainly from Outdoors 55 and Neves knives. And if you want to see in greater detail what I'm going to show you here, then please go check out their channels. And the only reason I'm making this video myself is just to get this out to more people, get the knowledge of how to properly sharpen, at least by my estimation, out to more people. So, yeah, let's go ahead and get into it here. The stuff you're going to need to sharpen, and this will work for pretty much any knife, is just this, a good diamond stone. Natural stones do work for some steels, but for harder steels and super steels like S30V, Magna Cut, and others, you're really going to want diamond and a good strop. What I have here, and you do not have to get this brand, and I'm not sponsored by this brand, but I do really love this, is the Sharpen, and this is the 325 grit and 1200 grit. I believe this is like a 6-inch stone, and this is a strop that I made, and it is pretty much the same size as these stones, and this is just a piece of pine with some leather on top, like 2 to 3 ounce, and then some diamond compound on top. This is like 3 micron diamond compound, which is a bit fine, but it does work. So, and then I'm also going to be showing you how to achieve a mirror edge, and for that you will need a finer stone, and for that I have a Serax stone, which is not on camera right now, but I will get it when we come to it. Right now it is soaking, and I don't want to disturb it until it's done soaking. So we'll get to that. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But for now, I just want to go ahead and demonstrate proper sharpening technique. And you can get an extremely sharp edge, in fact a hair whittling edge, just off of this stone and this strop, or a comparable quality diamond stone and strop. I know DMT makes good ones as well, and I think Easy Lap as well makes a fairly decent diamond stone. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Going to prove, first off, that this knife is indeed dull, and I'm going to first of all make a couple cuts here. I don't know. It doesn't look all that dull cutting paper, but I can feel it's quite dull. It won't really shave hair, but just to prove that it is definitely dull, I'm going to go ahead and cut into this diamond stone just a little bit here. Okay, that edge is nice and rounded over now. It will probably still cut paper a little, but that'll just be the burr just sort of shredding the paper. Yeah, that's nasty. So let's go ahead and real fast take a look at what that edge looks like under a microscope here. Okay, so as you can see, the edge is pretty coarse and rough, and you can definitely see the burr there as that black line along the edge, and our scratch pattern is pretty rough on this one. I have sharpened this knife before, but it is definitely due for a resharpening. So let's go ahead and get into it. So we're going to start here on the 325 grit side, and we're going to start just by turning over a burr and getting a good scratch pattern. And we're going to start on this side, and you're going to hold the knife against the stone. You're going to try to find the factory angle, and you'll know you found the factory angle when not only it'll feel right. It's hard to describe, but it'll feel right as it's gliding across the stone, and you'll see that the scratch pattern will just neatly cover the existing edge. It won't be just on the very tip of the edge, and it won't come back onto the blade here. It'll just be neatly covering the edge, and I'm going to show what that looks like as well under the microscope, hopefully. And how you're going to hold your knife against the stone depends on what sort of knife you have. So this is a knife with a lot of belly, and that means we're going to be taking it across the flat of the stone, but as we go, we're going to be giving it a slight little bit of lift. You see my wrist is coming up here, lifting just a little bit to compensate for the curve of the knife. And this is going to be the same for any knife that has a curve like this. For something that is a straight edge, like the QSP Penguin, you're actually going to want to keep it mostly flat against the stone, maybe just the slightest bit of lift just to make sure you're getting the whole edge. But you don't want to lift too much, otherwise you'll end up turning your Wharncliffe into a Wharncliffe with an ugly little upturn at the end, and you don't want to do that. So one thing to make sure also that you don't do is you don't want to turn your angle up too much, because then you'll sort of that'll do, I don't know, it'll sort of round off the tip a little bit, sort of actually square it off, and it won't look very good. But you don't want to do it too little, because then you'll end up with a really wide edge up here, and it'll kind of do the same thing, if that makes any sense. But you just want to make sure you're holding that exactly the factory angle. Now, if you have something with a recurved blade, such as a karambit, I recently had a viewer ask for advice when sharpening and using this kind of knife. You're going to want to, instead of using the flat of the stone, you're going to use the edge of the stone. So when I'm making my passes here, I'm going to be making sure to guide the edge of the knife all along the edge of the stone here, and that way the edge is making full contact with the entirety of the stone. And it might be a little bit difficult to get the right angle when doing this, so it'll help to like put you can't see the edge of my table here, but to put your stone on the edge of the table, and that way the knife can sort of hang off the table and you can get the right angle on it here, just like that. So that's how you would go about a karambit. Otherwise, other than that difference, you're going to sharpen a karambit the exact same way. You're just going to raise a burr on both sides and then clean the burr off, and that's what we're going to do here. So let's go ahead. I'm going to flip this around. It's a little more comfortable to do it this way. I'm going to go ahead and start raising a burr on the other side, which I accomplished by sharpening on this side. So let's go ahead and get into it here. You're going to be using pretty heavy pressure. I'm not really sure how many pounds exactly, but you're going to be using fairly heavy pressure because you are wanting to remove quite a bit of material here. You're going to need to. Depending on the condition of your knife, you may need to remove a substantial amount of material to get to an actual apex. And the reason we want to form a burr is because that is how we know that we've actually apexed. If we don't form a burr, we have no real way of knowing whether or not we formed an apex. So right now, I can see that my scratch pattern is looking good. It's looking like it is covering the edge and no more. I don't have a shiny spot towards the front of my edge indicating, or just towards the front of my edge, indicating that my sharpening angle is too steep, and I haven't widened the edge out, meaning that my sharpening angle isn't too shallow. So it looks like my angle is just right. I just need to keep going until I can feel a burr form on the opposite side, which I'll feel by moving my fingers up this way. Alright, so let's keep going here. You can see I'm giving just a little bit of lift up to compensate for the belly of the knife, and making sure that I'm grinding all the way to the tip, because I feel like that's how often the tip gets overlooked when sharpening, is you just don't lift up enough and you're afraid to grind into it. Don't be afraid to actually hit that there, because if you don't, it won't get sharp. And another thing, I've found that sometimes I tend to lift up this way a little bit towards the heel of the knife. That's okay to a certain extent, but don't do that too much, because what that'll do is that'll actually make your angle back here too shallow, and you'll end up prematurely smiling this portion out. You don't want to do that. It's more of an aesthetic thing than anything, but it can also make your knife more difficult to resharpen in the future and slowly cause the belly up here and the choil to get wider, and you don't really want that. You just want to keep it as close to stock looking as possible. Even though I did run this knife's edge across the stone, it still isn't going to take much. I can already feel a burr forming. So because this stone is very aggressive, it takes away metal very quickly. So I can already feel a small burr forming, and keep working until I form a burr that is easily viewable under the microscope. Alright, so the edge is looking pretty good. I'm going to actually take this knife off camera for just a second and look at the burr up close. Alright, it's looking pretty good. I'm going to keep working on this side for just a second. It already looks fairly shiny just under this light, but it will get way shinier once we get into the actual polishing. But that is not a step that you have to do. In fact, I will demonstrate here in a few minutes that you could honestly go straight off of this stone without even stropping, if you do it right, and have an extremely sharp, usable edge. I'm going to start using a little more of the stone here just to get a little more speed out of it. There we go. Now I can really feel that burr getting turned over. So I'm going to go ahead and show that if I can under the microscope. First, I'll show this side with the new scratch pattern, then I'll show the other side, which will show the burr turned over. Alright, so here you can see the new scratch pattern, and this is on the side of the blade that I've been abrading against the stone. So you can see all the scratches are the same size, very consistent, and they're moving in the same direction. And then I will show the other side. Alright, so on this side you can see that there is a huge black line across the top of the edge, and that is the burr. So that is what you want to see. I can see that with my eyes, but it is even easier to see through the microscope here. So I'm going to actually get rid of that now, or at least push it over to the other side by starting to abrade on this side of the edge. So let's go ahead and get started. It's not going to take much for me to flip this burr over because I've already apexed, as I can tell by the formation of the burr in the first place. Now, something that may be deceiving is that when I took the knife perpendicularly across the stone, I did form a burr, but it feels different than the burr that you formed doing this. The burr that I formed going this way is more like a cabinet scraper burr. It will cut, but it cuts in a different way. If you form a burr like this, it'll cut if you scrape the knife like this. So if you're using your knife for a lot of scraping, I would not recommend this, but you could theoretically improve its performance by taking it perpendicularly across the stone to even finer grits, and you would theoretically achieve a very sharp burr that you could use to scrape. But since we don't usually use knives for scraping, but rather for cutting, you don't want to do that. That's you should leave that to a dedicated cabinet scraper. Which if you've never seen one of those before, it's basically just a piece of steel. I believe they're made out of spring steel, and you basically just run it back and forth across a stone and on the edge like this, and it will form a burr that you can actually scrape with. You can scrape super fine shavings, which is kind of neat, but totally not what we're supposed to be talking about right now. So I can already feel I formed a burr here, but I'm going to form a little bit more of a burr just so it shows better on camera. Alright, that feels really good. I can tell it's going to show really well under the microscope. So now let's take a look at the burr on this side under the scope here. Alright, so as you can see, we have flipped over the burr effectively. It's just a big, nasty, ugly burr along the edge. So now, what we're going to do, now that we have formed a burr on both sides, it's only really necessary to form a burr on one side, because if you've formed a burr on one side, that means you've apexed. But I find it helps to establish my scratch pattern better, forming a burr on both sides. So now that we've got that burr fully formed, we're actually going to remove it, and we're going to remove it on the 325. So we're just going to do alternating passes, stroking just towards the edge. You're just basically like you're shaving thin layers off the stone, and at this point I'm using very little pressure, not a whole lot more than just the weight of the blade itself across the stone. And that's because I'm not really trying to remove a ton of material at this point. I'm just trying to essentially both abrade away and snap off that burr. And what'll happen is, I don't know if you've ever worked a staple. I don't know if you've ever worked a staple back and forth until it broke. That's basically what we're doing. It's called work hardening. I learned all this from Outdoors 55, by the way. And like I said, it's called work hardening. You work a piece of metal back and forth. Works pretty much on any metal, at least anything that's not like a spring steel, and eventually it will harden and snap. And it'll get really hot in the process too, but not on this scale. So that's basically what we're doing. We're both work hardening and snapping off the burr and also abrading it away. So just light back and forth passes, getting that burr removed. And as I was saying earlier, if you do this step right, then you can have an extremely sharp and useful edge just off of this fairly coarse grit stone. In fact, some people can take a knife to shaving sharp just off of like a brick or a cinder block, without stropping or anything, just through mastery of this technique. I can feel the knife feels very sharp. I'm going to check for burrs. I feel a burr on this side still, which means I need to increase my angle a little bit on this side. And the more, I can't say the more time, but the more attention you pay at this step, the better your final edge is going to be. You don't want to spend too long on this because, I mean, you are taking away a comparatively large amount of steel on this high grit or low grit, but if you really, I would say if you really take your time, make sure that you are removing that burr completely, then your resulting edge will be much better. So edge feels very sharp at this point. I can tell I've mostly removed the burr. I feel there's still a little bit back here, and that's mostly it. So I'm going to go ahead and do a couple more back and forth passes. Then we'll show this under the microscope and show just how sharp it really is. Alright, that feels very good. I can tell this is very sharp, so let's go ahead and show this edge under the microscope. Sorry for the voice crack there. Probably will have more of them, and then we will go ahead and test the sharpness on the piece of paper there. So as you can see, we have still a pretty coarse edge, but there's no burr left. And I will show on the other side too. Let me flip it over here. On the other side too, there's no burr. So, and I can't say I cheated. There was some stuff like that on the edge, which may look like a burr, but it's actually just little bits of already shaved off metal that was just stuck to the blade. So that's not really a burr. It could be a tiny little piece of burr, but I don't think so. It's mostly just metal dust that's sticking. Now, it does look like we have a tiny bit of burr up there towards the tip, but I can remove that fairly easily on the next grit. So I'm going to go ahead and show, just without any stropping or anything, how sharp this is off the stone with proper burr removal. Alright, so we can cut spirals in this sheet of paper just off of a 325 grit stone with no strop. And this will, in fact, shave arm hair with no issues whatsoever. Alright, so you do not need a bunch of fancy equipment to get a knife shaving sharp. You can do it in a couple minutes. I know we're 23 minutes in, but I could have done this in probably less than 5 minutes just on this one stone. On this one side of this stone, just 325 grit, no strop, no anything, and it is razor sharp already. So if you wanted to, you could stop here, and this would be a very useful edge, and it would probably last you quite a while. However, it will be better, even better, if we go ahead and refine that edge and refine any micro burr that still might be left on the 1200 grit, and then we'll take it to a strop. And then for those of you who are interested, we'll also go over, if time allows, how to do a polished edge with the Serac stones, and then hopefully I will get to how to do a carving knife. If not, then I'll do a separate video on that, because I have people waiting on carving knife videos. Alright, so let's go ahead and switch over to our 1200 grit, and wow, terrible voice crack, and show that. Alright, so I'm not going to be doing any back and forth on this, because all I'm doing is refining the scratch pattern and further removing that burr. Alright, so we're just going to go ahead and do our light alternating passes. Once again, very little pressure. And you'll very quickly see that edge start to refine. So I'm just going to do a few passes here and then show this under the microscope, and it will immediately look much better. Alright, so that feels really good and sharp. I don't feel any burrs. I just feel, well, no, I don't think there's a burr there. It's just the way the tip is, but that's fine. Alright, I'm going to look at this up close real fast with my own eyes, make sure it looks good, and then I'll show it under the microscope. Alright, yes, this looks very good, so let's go ahead and take a look under the microscope. Alright, so as you can see, our scratch pattern is immediately much more refined. Scratches are much smaller and closer together. And I do see the slightest little bit of burr. Oh wow, there's actually some substantial burr there, or that could just be metal dust on the edge from where I haven't wiped it off yet. But regardless, you can see that the scratches are getting much more refined. Let's look at the other side as well. Alright, so there's the other side. Also, you can see it's much more refined. Scratches are much smaller, much closer together, so looking good. Alright, so let's go ahead and do a couple more passes on this just to make sure that burr is completely gone. Then I will strop it and show that. Then we'll move on to polishing. Alright, so that should be good for our edge refinement and burr removal. I can feel the edge is extremely sharp. And actually I've already shown this on the microscope, it'll look about the same, but before I take it to the shop, I want to demonstrate once again. We are hair peeling sharp now. Hair is just flying off the edge, and we are beyond paper cutting sharp. It will do laps around paper here. Alright, so now let's drop it and see what that changes. When you're stropping, you're just going to make very light back and forth passes. You're going to try to hold the exact angle that you were holding when you were sharpening, and you want to work from the tip of the blade down to the heel or choil. At least I think it can be called a heel. And yeah, just light pressure. Don't want to dig in too much. Never want to strop towards the edge because that would be cutting into the leather. And what you're doing here is you're basically just refining the edge. You're giving it a slightly tighter scratch pattern, as well as removing any fragments of burr that might possibly be left at this point. One mistake that I used to make when I would sharpen is that I would rely on this drop to remove massive burrs, and that simply will not work. Most of your burr removal, 99% of your burr removal, has to be done on the stone. And it's not difficult to do once you understand how to do it, but you cannot rely on the strop to remove the burr. The strop is there to remove the very last, very, very small fragments of burr that might still be clinging to the edge, as well as to give it that last polish. Alright, so let's go ahead and put this under the microscope real fast. Alright, so as you can see, the edge is, there won't be a whole lot of refinement in the scratch pattern, mainly because the strop is at 3 micron, and the diamond grains are too small to noticeably improve the scratch pattern at this grit, at the 1200 grit that we're at. But once we get to the mirror polish, you will see a difference, major difference between the stropped edges and unstropped edges. But you can see it definitely does look shinier, and the burr is completely gone. So at this point, the knife, let me flip it over here and show the other side. At this point, the knife is extremely sharp. It was very sharp before. It was very sharp off of the 325 grit, but at this point, this is the limit of what most people need out of a knife. And after this, I am actually going to go to church and then record the next segment of this video in which I will show you all how to do a polished edge. So, before I do that real fast, I'm going to demonstrate how this edge works. It is ridiculously sharp, and it is just popping hairs off the arm, and at this point it is probably hair whittling sharp, but I'm going to go ahead and put it down for now, and I'll catch up with you all later. Alrighty, I am back. It has been almost exactly 3 hours, and I'm ready to continue with this sharpening demonstration. So I left off with explaining how this edge, this 1200 grit edge off of the strop, is probably hair whittling, and I'm going to see if I can back that up. So let's grab a hair here and see if this will whittle hair. This may take a try or two, just because the actual hair whittling itself is actually kind of a task in itself. It requires more than just a sharp knife. There's like a certain technique to it as well, but it is nonetheless a pretty good test. I know it whittled a little bit there. I felt it grab. It's just I'd like to get a good observable whittle out of it. It may require a little more stropping to get to actual hair whittling sharp, but that is okay. Now let's drop it a couple more times. I do believe it is capable of being hair whittling sharp straight off, well, after what I've done so far, just with a little bit more stropping. So once again, just making sure to hold that angle close, if not exactly where it was when sharpening. And you don't want to strop too shallow because you just won't hit the edge, but you don't want to strop way too steep because you have the possibility of rolling over the edge. So just try to maintain that angle. And if you feel that the strop isn't doing anything, there's probably a few things that could be happening. Either your compound is wearing thin, which is not likely with diamond compound, or your stripe angle is too shallow and you're actually just not hitting the apex. And that is more likely to happen on thinner leathers like this that are spongy, won't compress as much. On a thicker leather, you're more likely to accidentally roll over the apex, which is not a good thing. And there really is no limit as to how much you can strop. The more you strop, the more chances you give yourself to roll the apex over, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you will. It's just, you just got to make sure if you're going to strop a lot, make sure you strop right, and you should be fine. All right. That feels a little better. So let's see if it will whittle hair now. There's two ways to whittle hair. You can whittle away from the root or towards the root. Away from the root is... No, towards the root is easier, away from the root is harder. Towards the root is single hair whittling, away from the root is double hair whittling, according to Outdoors 55. You'll notice that I take a lot of my sharpening stuff from him, and I regard him as one of the lead sharpening authorities on YouTube, as well as Neve's Knives. And they do collaborate a lot, or at least a fair amount. Alright, so there we go. It did whittle hair a little bit there. I'd like to maybe get a little more pronounced of a whittle from it, but it did indeed whittle. I can tell it's wanting to. I can tell it's trying to grab. Yeah. Yep, it is whittling hair. It may be difficult to see, but you'll see the whittled part will actually catch the light a little bit there. So, I'm not going to try to show it on the microscope because that never works, but trust me when I say, in fact, you could probably see it here. It did actually whittle hair. Not the best whittle I've ever seen, but it will do it, and this is extremely sharp. This is more than a working edge. This is pretty much, like I said, all the edge the average person is going to need. Now, let's say you have a steel, like I believe M4 is like this. I'm not sure if 8CR, or in this case, I think this is 9CR. I'm not sure if this is like this. I think it can be. But some steels require a polished edge for maximum edge retention, and they just perform best with a polished edge. So let's do that. Let's get this to a polished edge. And to do that, we'll be using the Cerax 1000 and 6000 grit ceramic stone, which I will grab here. Give me 1 second. Alrighty, so here's our Cerax dual grit water stone. The blue side here is your 1000 grit, and the white side is 6000. You'll notice that I'm using water on this. This is a water stone. It has to be used with water. If you don't use it with water, you're going to damage it. Whereas I should have said this in the beginning, but these sharp ball stones and pretty much all diamond stones really don't want to use water or oil on. They're best used dry. Definitely not. I can't remember. I know that Sharp Ball in the manual says not to use either water or oil. Like they say you can use one, but you don't really need it. But I think they say like never use oil or something. But I've also heard never use water because that can make them rust. And I would tend to agree with that. I would just avoid using any sort of lubrication on diamond stones because they don't need it. All they need as far as maintenance is an occasional wipe down with a dry paper towel, which I don't know if this does this to anyone else, but that makes me very uncomfortable to do that. It's just the texture of the paper towel on the diamond stone is like nails on a chalkboard to me, but I have to do it every once in a while. So yeah, that's all the maintenance you need. You don't need lubrication on a diamond stone. You do need to use water on these, or like I said, you will damage them. So this has been soaking for like 3 hours now. It only needs like 15 to 20 minutes or so, I believe, was in the manual of soaking time. But I mean, yeah, so I would have just given it that much time, but I had to go to church. So that gave it really good time to soak. So let's go ahead and get a little more water on the surface. If this spray bottle will work for me here. And just want just enough just to give it some smoothness here. And then I'm going to use this old microfiber. Is that my old microfiber? Yeah, we'll just use that one. That's fine. And I'm just going to actually, instead of, so on the 1200 grit, I guess I just sprayed water on it accidentally. On the 1200 grit diamond, I wasn't working back and forth. I was just doing one stroke this way, one stroke this way. On this, actually, I'm going to work back and forth a little bit, mainly because I'm really wanting to get a good polish out of this, and it's going to take much longer if I do stroke by stroke. So I'm just going to work each side, and at this grit, it's not going to raise a tremendous burr, and if it does, I can remove it. So this is not typically what you do if you're just sharpening, but since I'm polishing, I do want to work back and forth a little bit. So I'm just going to hold exactly the same angle that I've been when sharpening. And I'm just going to watch for that polish to show up on the bevel here. And I can tell that it is already working. I'm just going to examine the edge up close with my own eyes briefly just to see how it looks. Yes, it's looking pretty good so far. I may need to raise my angle just slightly, make sure I'm getting the whole edge, but it's looking pretty good so far. And I will show this a 1000 grit scratch pattern on the microscope here in a moment. This 1000 grit scratch pattern off of ceramic is going to look different than the 1200 grit scratch pattern from the diamond. It's going to be finer. That's just the way these ceramic stones are. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but I know that there is most definitely a variation like that between different mediums, between different types of stones, as to what grit is actually what. So for example, like the 325 grit of my diamond stone doesn't really feel like 325 grit sandpaper. I think it's fairly close, but I believe it'll actually produce a coarser scratch pattern than 325 grit actual sandpaper. So yeah, it's just sort of interesting how that varies. Alright, so it's looking very good so far, and I'm actually going to use the microscope to help both you all and myself determine whether or not I've hit the whole edge with this 1000 grit. And I think it does definitely look like I have, but I need to get it under the microscope to make sure. So let's go ahead and do that. Yeah, it's definitely looking good. I think I have slightly changed the direction of my sharpening, but still, the scratch pattern does look finer to me. I think it's in focus. Yeah, there we go. Now it's in better focus. And you'll notice that it's harder to see the scratches now, which it may be slight focusing problems, but I think that's just because the scratches are getting much finer and much closer together due to the finer nature of the stone. So I think that looks good. I don't see any super rough areas towards the back or the front of the edge. And by that, I mean I don't see any I don't see any rough areas towards the top of the blade or towards the tip of, or towards the apex. And that would indicate a problem with my angle, but I don't see that, so I think we're good. I'm actually going to look at the edge closest to the choil, because that's the area that most frequently gets messed up, but it looks good. So I can definitely tell I have abraded away. So I get this back into focus. I've abraded away a little bit of the PVD. Well, you can see that on the camera there at the choil, but that is no big deal, and probably some of that was from the previous owner. I bought this used at a yard sale, so it's like it's had some stuff done to it. Obviously, there's like paint dried on here that I can't get off, and probably could, and just not really worth the time. So, all right, let's go ahead and work on the other side here, and then we will do a few passes to eliminate any burr that developed, and then switch over to the 6000 grit. Alright, so I'm going to look at this with my own eyes for a moment, see what it looks like. Alright, looking pretty good, so we'll look at this side under the microscope as well, just to confirm that we have indeed covered the entire edge with that scratch pattern, I believe. Alright, so you can see that yes, the scratch pattern is much finer. There's no weird areas that it looks like I've missed. Scratch pattern looks a little bit different on the belly, but that's just because of the direction that I'm sharpening. Let's try to go back to the choil here. Once again, the most commonly messed up area, and it looks pretty good. Looks like I might need to increase my angle just on the slightest, like on the back 32nd of an inch of the edge, but I'm not really going to worry about that because it looks good. So I'm just going to work back and forth on this side a little bit more, and then maybe back and forth on the other side, but I think the other side's good. So I'm just going to do a few back and forth passes now, actually, and that'll help, like I said, remove any burr that may have formed from this, and then we'll move on to the 1000 grit. Your refining passes on the ceramic stone is going to be exactly the same. And I neglected to mention that when I'm doing this polishing, I'm not really applying a ton of pressure, just because it's not necessary. And all I'm really doing is it's just very light polishing action. I don't really need to be pressing into the stone, just letting the stone do the work and get that nice polish. And I do find that using a small microscope like this does work. This one is by Carson. I guess other companies probably make them. I'm not really sure. I haven't really looked into them. I just saw this one at Sierra, and it was cheap, and I figured it'd be very useful for this, and it has proven to be extremely useful for this. More useful than I could have imagined. So happy I grabbed that. I do recommend getting something like that. A jeweler's loop would probably also work. an actual like scientific microscope doesn't work very well because it's hard to get the light onto the edge in the way that you want it, and at the resolution that most scientific microscopes work at, or at the zoom level rather, it's hard to get the entire edge in focus. The focus is so fine on a scientific microscope that the apex is at a totally different focus level than like the back part of the edge. So if that makes any sense, that just means it's very difficult to actually look at the entire edge using a high power microscope, which I've tried before. And I mean, you can do it, and it's definitely good if you're wanting to analyze an extremely fine scratch pattern where you only really need to see the very, very fine apex. But if you're wanting to look at the whole edge, something like this or even just a small magnifying glass would be better. Alright, so that looks good to me. I'm going to go ahead and flip this stone over, and we'll move on to these 6,000 grit. One important thing with these stones is that they love to mold. So after you're done with it, I do recommend make sure to dry it off real good with a paper towel. But then I'm actually trying to figure out the best way to dry these things out, because I can literally let them hang here in my room and air dry for days, and they'll still have some retained moisture. So then I put it back in the case, and it actually molds in there. So I'm not really sure what the best way is to dry these things out thoroughly. Maybe put them in some heat, but I don't know if I would really want to do that. And as far as the mold, I've taken care of it by a little bit of alcohol spray, just like, whatever, 91%, whatever it is, isopropyl alcohol, I guess, whatever you get in the pharmacy at Walmart. That's what I use to try to kill the mold, but I don't know if that hurts the ceramic or not. I don't think it would. I think ceramic would be fairly impervious to that. But if any of you all know how to best dry these things out, please let me know. I'm still figuring these things out, and I think I figured out fairly well how to use them. I was trying to figure out how to store them and what they like. So, all right, let's go ahead and work this 1,000 grit 6,000 grit exactly the same as the 1,000 grit. Just back and forth, just polishing that edge. Not a whole lot of pressure, making sure to hold that same angle, getting the whole edge. This 6,000 grit feels so smooth under the blade. It feels like I'm sharpening almost on glass. It's so smooth. And this will result in a pretty much, it's a very, very near mirror polish. I would say all you need is an 8,000 grit to get to a full mirror, and I do believe they make 10,000 grit stones. I'm not sure how much more that would do though. I'm sure that 10,000 grit is getting close to the point of diminishing returns. And honestly, as far as actual usable sharpness, I am well past diminishing returns now. Now, there is something to be said for edge retention, for polished blades, excuse me. Some blades, like I said, I believe M4 and a lot of other steels perform better at polished edges, and there's a very useful video for that. Neves Knives, Jerry Neves, he has a very good video explaining for each individual steel what sort of edge it likes best. So, like, for example, if I can remember this correctly, I don't even really remember these, but I know that it varies significantly from steel to steel. Like, I think that CPM 154 takes a polished edge, and then 154 CM, which I believe is a different steel, takes a cloudy edge or something like that. It's been a little while since I watched the video, so don't quote me on that. Definitely go watch it for yourself, because it is an excellent video. There's just so many things you would never even think of, and it's a cool video, so definitely, like I said, go check that out. But I'm not really here to tell you what steels need what edge. I'm just here to show you how to get a polished edge or a cloudy edge, which was basically how it was off of the 1,000 grit ceramic. Was basically a cloudy edge. It really was technically a cloudy edge off of the 1,200 grit diamond, but we're getting a really good polished edge. I'm going to work this just a little bit more, and then we'll look at it under the microscope. And there's not going to be a whole lot to see under the microscope at this point. The scratch pattern is so fine that it's basically just going to look like just sort of a cloudy sort of finish. And under, like, with your eyes, it just looks like a mirror finish. But under the microscope, a little bit higher resolution, it'll look just kind of cloudy. You won't be able to see very many scratches There's going to be some scratches just because this isn't a perfect process, so. Alright, I think that's probably good, and I'm going to look at it real fast, up close. That looks good to me. May need to up my angle just a little bit, but I'm going to look at it under the microscope with you all just to make sure. I'm going to get all the water off the edge because that'll refract and look weird. Alright. Okay, so as I thought, at this point, the edge is kind of difficult to see because there's just not as much to see. The scratches are extremely fine, very close together, and just difficult to see in general, which is good. That means that we have a very refined and polished edge. I'm just going to inspect the whole thing. It looks like towards the tip we may need to up the angle just a little because I think I might see just the slightest little bit of edge that has not gotten the full polish. So yes, looks like I can definitely see something right there towards the tip. You can see a different shine, and that is coming from a little bit of that either 1200 grit diamond or 1000 grit ceramic that didn't get touched by this 6000, so I'll need to go back and hit that for sure. And then, but the rest of the edge looks fairly good. I just need to, I think, up my angle just very slightly. Let's go back and look at the choil, make sure it's okay. Yep, looks pretty okay to me. So I'm just going to adjust, sorry, voice crack, adjust very slightly to get the very tip there, and then I will switch over to the other side. So in order to get that, I've actually kind of squared the tip off just slightly, probably over the course of sharpening this knife over the past however long I've owned it. Probably didn't all happen in this video, but yeah, I just want to adjust a little bit just to get that tiny little bit that I didn't quite get. Alright, I think that probably did it. I'm just going to look at that. Yep, that looks okay. I still see the tiniest little bit, but we're not going to worry about that for now. So let's go ahead and switch over to the other side. Same procedure. Just getting that good polish out. And then after I finish with this 6000, the 3 micron strop will bring it to an absolute mirror. It will be so reflective. And even like the 325 grit looked reflective through the camera. But when you're seeing this with your own eyes, you can really tell the difference between all the different grits. This is just such a beautiful edge at this point. And I actually did another very similar, very nice mirror edge on this CJRB Tundra the other day, and I recorded all of it except for a 30-minute section that got corrupted. So that is why I am doing this again, and it is a pity that this knife has a beautiful mirror edge which you all will never see me make because yeah, part of the video got corrupted. So that's why I'm redoing this, but it's good because I learned from that last video what to do, what not to do when making one of these videos. So yeah. And in between there, I did a factory reset on the phone that I record with and completely cleansed the SD card to where it's like completely fresh now. Like basically new phone, new SD card, nothing should go wrong. Still, for some reason, whenever I get to around the 30-minute mark, it warns me that I'm running out of space, but I think that's just referring to the maximum length of video it will let me take in one shot. So that's why this is probably going to have a few stitches in it, but hopefully it should be fairly smooth. But anyway, we were polishing this other side. This whole video has probably been shaking the camera a little bit, my apologies, but the stabilization is pretty good on these phones, so. And the phone that I record with is not my primary phone. It is an old burner phone. Well, it used to be my primary phone, but I got another phone that I thought would be better, and it's kind of better, but also kind of not, but it's okay. It's I'll do, while I'm doing this, I'll do a brief phone review. The Moto G Supra, which is the phone that I record on, was a very good phone. It lasted forever. It only kind of slowed down towards the end, and after I stopped using it, it slowed down quite a bit just because I think regular use kind of kept it sharp. But the Moto G stylus, which I have now, I do not recommend getting one. It's not the worst phone, but it definitely has issues, and the build quality is just not that great. So I would recommend getting something else. I'm not sure what. I'm still figuring that out myself, but I would just stay away from the Moto G stylus. All right. That being said, the only phones I've ever had, except my very first phone, which was a plastic TCL, um, all of my phones, well, I've only had two, but they've both been Motorola's, and Motorola's are pretty good, it seems, as far as it goes. All right, so I think that the other side here now has a good mirror polish. Let's go ahead and look at this through the microscope after I wipe it down one more time, and we'll see what we're looking at. All right, so here is our edge. Same, very nice, tight scratch pattern, very little space in between the scratches, and good fine scratches. Sorry, losing the focus there, and I'm going to look back at the choil if I can. This angle is very difficult to get. Looks like I'm not going to be able to get the choil, but that's okay. I can just look at that with my eyes, and then look at the tip, make sure it's looking okay. Yep, looking pretty good. So you can see some of the paint on there. All right, so this edge is looking great. So now, since I've got both sides polished to where I want them, I'm going to go and do a few back and forth passes, remove any tiny little burr that may have formed. This stone is so fine that it's not going to form much of a burr, if any. I mean, it's going to form some burr. And due to the nature of how apexing works, you're always going to have some burr. It's just the issue is, or the concept is how small the burr is. If the burr is big enough for you to see, it's too big. And by doing the edge refinement process, you can get it down to where the burr is so small, to where the burr is so small that it's insignificant. That's what I was trying to say. Just because of, like I said, because of how apexes work, there's always going to be a burr. There can't not be a burr. But the idea is just to get the burr so microscopically small, and I do mean microscopic. The burr is invisible with the unaided eye. So, yeah. All right. I think that just about does it. So I'm going to need to wash this microfiber cloth. Looking very good. Feels extremely sharp. Let's go ahead, and I don't need to show it under the microscope again. I'm going to go and take it to the strop, and then I'll show it under the microscope one last time. Actually, before I do that, before I strop it, I should demonstrate how sharp it is. Straight off the stone, we are still hair-popping sharp. And will be even more so after the strop. One thing that will happen when you do an extreme polished edge like this is some steels, now this may be a matter of technique, but I think it's more of a matter of the steel, it can lose its bite. So it'll still be an extremely sharp edge, it will still perform well, it just may lose some of the stickiness that a coarser edge would be, or a coarser edge would have. So, yeah, go and do the paper test one more time here. It is extremely sharp, and that strop will help take care of that a little bit. The strop will just get everything nice and straight. So I'm going to go ahead and strop real fast here. So, yeah, this is really bringing out that last little bit of shine we needed to call this a true mirror. And even if this isn't a true mirror, it is a very near mirror, close enough to where I'm willing to call it a true mirror. And I mean, you could always argue that nothing's a true mirror because you could always polish finer, right? But this is close enough to what I would consider a true mirror, to where, yeah, I can say this is a mirror edge. And soon enough, if I do enough of these videos, and if I just keep obsessing over this, all of my knives will be mirror sharp, or mirror edge, whereas a couple months ago, none of them were. I just recently got this ceramic stone, and the first few times I used it, I could not figure it out. I could not figure out what I was doing wrong, but I guess something clicked at some point by the grace of God, and now I know exactly, well, now I feel like I know exactly what I need to do to get these quite beautiful, in my estimation, mirror edges. I love how these look. And even if on some steels they're not as functional, like some steels perform terribly with a mirror edge, they're so pretty. And it's a poor excuse for putting one on if it's going to perform terribly, but it's not going to make such a difference on a knife that it's going to mean life or death. Probably. Always could, never know, but probably won't. That's really more a convenience thing than anything. If you, like for example, if you're polishing, M4 is the first one that always comes to mind. If you're sharpening M4, and I mean, yeah, you might get 50 more cuts out of it with a polished edge than a cloudy edge. I don't know if that's the actual way that would work out, but it's not going to be something where it lasts for like 10 years on a polished edge and 10 months on a cloudy edge. It's not going to be that huge of a difference, but it will be enough to save you some time and be a little more convenient. Alright, so that's looking extremely good, extremely reflective. Let's go ahead and take a look at that one more time under the microscope. And this, I believe, is a fine enough grit to where we'll actually notice a significant difference between the 6000 grit ceramic and the 3 micron strop. Yeah, so as I thought, it's even more difficult to actually just see the edge now. And I think that's because there's less, even though it's technically like a more reflective looking surface, you can see yourself in it, it's actually bouncing a little less light, if that makes sense. There's less grooves and valleys and stuff to catch the light, bounce it back through the microscope, so it looks duller. It's kind of like, I don't know how to describe it. It's there's just not as much surface area, I guess, to catch the light. Even though it's very high polished and reflective, there's just, yeah, a coarser grit you can actually see better through a microscope. But, I mean, you can tell it's extremely well polished. The scratches, once again, are very small and close together. So that's our good high polished edge. Looks beautiful on the camera, looks even better in person. This is something you really have to see in person and have to do it yourself to really appreciate the beauty of it. So let's see how that edge is feeling. Feels absolutely amazing. I'm not extremely thrilled with how it feels towards the tip or towards the belly there, but that may just be operator error. Probably is. But at any rate, it is extremely sharp, slices through paper extremely well, and this edge should last a very long time. I'm gonna just test that. And another way you can test this is risky and kind of stupid, but you can just kind of test how well it bites the skin of your finger just by running your finger along the edge very slightly. You don't want to just take your real finger and run it across the edge, because it's a good way to cut your finger off if a knife is this sharp. But and I have thick calluses on my fingers, so I'm just feeling it bite the callus, and that gives me a good indication as to how much bite I really have. So this edge feels pretty good. Honestly, it felt like it had a little more bite at the 1200 grit, so maybe take that into consideration. Like I said, it may have been something that I did, but I think it might have more to do with the way polished versus coarser grit edges perform. So that'll be it for this part of the video. I'm trying to decide whether or not to make the carving knife video a separate video or not. I think I will, just to save the length of this video. But actually, you know what? I'm gonna go and do it. We're gonna just make this the all-in-one masterclass. So carving knives. Since we went ahead and covered karambits, we'll cover carving knives. So the difficulty with carving knives is that they are spring steel. spring steel is weird. It's very flexible, very bendy, and it holds a good edge, but the burr behaves very strangely with spring steel. So yeah, this is going to be interesting. I've honestly, like, this one is very sharp, and this one I've sharpened myself, but I still don't entirely understand this. So this will be, I think I can get it, and I think I can explain it, but bear with me here. So I'm going to start, because the individual who requested this segment of the video, the carving knife video, I know that the edges on his knives, because he has loaned his knives to me to sharpen before, and I know that the edges on some of his knives, the ones I did not sharpen, just from the factory, are not profiled very well. So we're going to go ahead and completely defy Flex Cut's instructions, and we're going to grind this thing on a diamond stone. They basically say only just drop it. That's all you should ever do. You're going to destroy it if you try to sharpen it. Now, some of us don't have the liberty of buying an inexpensive Flex Cut strop, and sometimes we destroy our edges, so we might need to reprofile this. So I feel like those of us who need to do it should be able to do it. So I'm going to see if I can do it. Let's get our 325 grit, and as much as this hurts me, let's do it. So, just for the sake of argument, I'm going to destroy the edge here. I'm not going to destroy it too much because it'll take an excessively long amount of time to get it back if I destroy it too much. Okay, so let's just say we were out enjoying a nice day whittling in the woods and then stumbled upon a band of concrete workers who needed us to score their concrete after they poured it. So that's what we did with our Flex Cut whittling knife. So now we're going to attempt to fix it. So the edge is very badly squared off, and it's going to take a little bit of grinding to get this back to apex, which will artificially set up the problem that I always experience with spring steels, and that is the burr does not behave. So let's get right to it. Let's get this thing apex. And you sharpen this just like you would a Scandi. You just want to press the entire edge against the stone, keep it nice and flat, and that way you're pretty much guaranteed to hit the apex. Just keep it nice and flat. And with this, since I want to basically restore this to a factory condition, I'm just going to keep going until I can see that the entire edge has been taken to that same scratch pattern. Now I can already tell looking at this is going to give me trouble because I can see the scratch pattern up here, and even though I'm holding this flat against the stone, I can see reflection off the very at the very apex, which means that I'm gonna have to hold a slightly steeper angle than I want to get this thing sharp, which may mean this was a convex grind, which is not something I want to deal with. But I'm gonna try it here and see if I can get a good grind on this. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. I need to bring my angle back a little bit here and up a little bit here, just to make sure I'm getting the full edge. No big deal, just a slight adjustment. You basically just need to play with your angles until you can tell that the entire edge has been abraded, and yeah, that's basically all there is to it here. I just want this edge to look pretty again, and this is going to be a full mirror polish. This is going all the way to the 6000, and it's going to go there pretty fast, honestly. Most likely. This is actually looking way better than I thought it would. I can tell I have a small burr on this side, but nothing like I thought. Usually this forms like a massive rolled wire burr and it never comes off. So we're going to see if that happens. I will not be surprised if it does. I will be frustrated, but not surprised. And I'll try to deal with it. Alright, that's good. That's looking very good, in fact. I can feel a nice, healthy burr along most of the edge, except for the very, very back here of the choil, where there's this tiny little burr that I can see that's been there for years. and I can never get rid of it. So I'm just going to really dig that corner in. And that did it. That rolled it over to where I needed it to be, so that's good. I'm going to keep working this side just a little bit more. And like I said, Flux Cut tells you not to do this. They say just drop it, don't try to sharpen on a stone, you'll destroy it. So we're going to see if they really do hold the magic keys to sharpness for all of their knives, or if the average knife person with a diamond stone can fix it. Honestly, it's looking really good. Way better than I thought it would at this point. Alright, like I said, I can feel the burr along the entire edge, so we're going to switch over to this side, get a good scratch pattern on this side. Alright, so what's happening here is I'm sharpening at way too steep of an angle, which means I've already rolled the burr over, but I'm not hitting the entire edge, so I need to roll my angle back a little bit. And if you discover that your carving knives are not spring steel, you can basically just sharpen them the same way you would sharpen a Scandi ground, like Mora knife, for example, or anything with a Scandi grind. You just hold the... I mean, you're going to sharpen this the same way as well. It's just this will probably require more time and attention to burr removal. It'll probably be much more of a pain. Hoping not, but that's the experience I've had with knives like this in the past, is that burr removal is a chore. And a half, if I dare say. Alright. So I can tell that I'm not, for whatever reason, I'm not getting the very middle of the blade. So I have two options. I can either sharpen onto the edge of the stone here and make sure that that edge hits across the stone, or I can just keep grinding until the blade actually flattens out and that starts getting hit. I'm going to see which happens first here. Alright, looks like, well, I've actually increased my angle a bit too much, so I'm going to have to roll it back a little bit more. The angle feels different on this side. It feels flatter than it did on the other side, which is most likely just my imagination, but definitely feels a little different to me. Yikes. Yeah, this side is definitely not going as smoothly. The burr is rolling over towards the back, but not towards the front. This is very interesting feeling. Alright, I'm just going to keep working it for a minute. Honestly, Scandi grinds do this too. Just regular carbon steel Scandi grind knives do this. And honestly, the Scandi grind is not my favorite grind. If you are... I used to think that it was easier to sharpen a Scandi grind, but the more I learn about sharpening and the better I get at freehand sharpening regular knives on a stone, the more I think that regular knives are actually easier to sharpen. Knives with a regular full flat or hollow grind or something like that. Just because there's less edge to sharpen. A Scandi grind, like a lot of the blade is the edge, whereas, and this is technically a Scandi grind, whereas with this, there's just this little, wow, that sounded really good for some reason. With this, there's just that little bit of edge that I have to sharpen, as opposed to this whole massive thing here. So, yeah, I prefer sharpening regular folding knives to big old Scandi grind fixed blades, which I have a couple of. I mean, they're not massive, they're just more, as I have a Robust and a 511 and an Eldris, and then a large one, a large blade kit that I put like a spalted maple, I think, handle on. And I have a Hella knife, which is also Scandi ground, but it is like triple laminated stainless. I haven't sharpened it much. It's a cool knife though. That one was also a kit. Alright, we're getting a fairly decent scratch pattern across the edge, so this is weird. It feels weird. The back part of the edge is rolled over, the front part is not, but it's also not rolled over on this side, so I don't know what it's doing. I'm just going to keep working it until I feel the whole edge rolled over, but that may take a moment. I'm going to work specifically the front portion of the edge because I can tell the back part has already rolled over nicely, so there's no need for me to continue just removing tons of material there when I don't need to. And once again, I'm assuming that the person sharpening, the person following this tutorial, I'm assuming that their carving knife is in terrible condition. I'm assuming, like I said, you have wandered into the wandering concrete pours and you have helped them score their concrete with your carving knife. So basically, yeah, I'm assuming your edge is in terrible shape. If it's not, if you can still feel that your edge is apexed, you may want to skip this and go straight to the 1200 or just use one of these and then a strop. So unfortunately, I don't have any. This is like one of the only carving knives I have, and so I don't have any that I feel like could be completely revived with just this. Maybe these blades could, but there are some chips and stuff in these. Maybe I'll try that in this video or in another video. I may try bringing these back to like extremely keen. These other blades, these are spoon blades, by the way. This is the spoon carving jack, I think, from FlexCut. I may try doing these on that. I think it'll work just fine. Just not at the moment, because these are different. They're chisel ground, basically. They're like Scandi chisel. So this side is a big old Scandi, and then this side is flat, like a chisel, like an Emerson. So hate doing those, but I may have to. In fact, I probably should. That would only be fair. I'm very curious to see how this mirror edge looks on this Scandi, though. See if it looks anything like the factory edge, because like this, it's easy to see it as a mirror because it's a very small portion, and you're not seeing a ton of metal here. So if that makes any sense, it's easy for it to look like a mirror. I'm curious to see how that translates to this, to see if it looks like a mirror at all, or if it just looks terrible. Based on how this 325 grit looks, though, I think it's going to look pretty good. Because this doesn't look bad. I mean, for a carving knife, it's egregiously terrible. But, yeah. But for an average knife, this 325 grit scratch actually looks pretty good. I'm actually going to up my angle just slightly towards the tip here, because I just feel like it's not really contacting. It's just not getting rolled over the way it's supposed to. Yeah, this is what I was afraid of with this spring steel. It just behaves so strangely. It can form a really nice, good rolled over burr one moment and then completely refuse the next. So let's see. What am I going to do now? Let's see. I think I can see just the slightest little bit of reflection here, which means I haven't hit that part. So I'm just going to tip my angle forward just a little, just the slightest little bit. Almost unfeelable. And just see if I can get that edge to roll over up front. It should, unless the front is tempered differently than the back, which I wouldn't be surprised for this type of knife. They do weird things to this spring steel. It is not normal steel. I don't know, it almost feels like it's just not apexed at all, but it seems like it rolled over a pretty decent burr on the other side. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to go back to this side, work this for a second more, and see if I can get that burr rolled over in the front of the edge. If I can get the burr rolled over on this side, then I'll know that on the other side, I'm just not holding the angle steep enough. But if it doesn't roll over on this side, then I'll know that there's something weird with the front of the knife here. Oh, it feels sharp, though. This is very interesting, and this is why I hate doing this. It's just very trial and error. Yeah, I'm just still not feeling that burr roll over towards the front, which is bothering me. Normally I would have a burr rolled over at this point, and I'm sure it has something to do with the nature of the Scandi grind, but it does feel extremely sharp. So what I may do is just assume that it has apexed, and for whatever reason, it's just not rolling over a burr, which makes absolutely zero sense, but that may just be what it's doing for whatever reason. And it could be that I don't know, it could be that the front portion of the blade is tempered in a much different way than the rear portion. But once again, I don't know. Alright, I'm going to work this side a little bit more. At any rate, we're getting a really, really good even edge out of this. So that's good at least. And too steep now. I'm too steep, but I feel like I may have actually finally succeeded in rolling over the slightest little burr on this side, which is great. It means we're making progress, finally. Alright, I feel like we finally rolled over a burr on this side, so I'm just going to do some back and forth passes now and just see what happens. I'm going to do a couple here and then just start doing back and forths. Okay, the burr is behaving better than I thought it was going to. It's still definitely moving back and forth a lot rather than breaking off, that's what I figured was going to happen, but it's not terrible. Not terrible. And it's probably going to take a significant amount of time to actually get this burr to come off of here. Probably going to have to abrade it off rather than work hardening and snapping it off, which is very frustrating, but that's just the way these knives are. And this is why they tell you not to do this, because once you get that burr formed, it's very difficult to remove it. And I believe they even sharpen these on like massive motorized strops that can just melt that burr off basically. Very difficult to do this by hand. Alright, I'm going to make sure I've actually apexed up here. It feels like I have. It feels extremely sharp up here. It just bothers me that I never really was able to form much of a burr up front. But what I'm going to do is for now I'm just going to trust that I have indeed apexed up here. And hopefully you'll understand that under normal circumstances you have to feel that burr to know that you've apexed. Under this situation, I feel that it has apexed. It's just not giving me the burr that I want, so I'm going to move on, not going to push it, not going to take away too much material. I'm just going to keep going with this, try to refine this burr, and see what happens. The burr is definitely coming off, which is good. It's not behaving as well as a normal knife burr would, but that is to be expected with this weird, soft, springy steel. Yeah, we're making progress. I mean, I can like push this burr back and forth with my fingers, which definitely means that it's going to have to be abraded off rather than worked off. Because, like I think I've said this probably a million times now, but with these harder steels, it is partially abrasion that removes the burr, but it's also just the burr moving back and forth that work hardens it like a paper clip, and it just breaks. This will not, it probably won't happen at all with this. You're just going to have to slowly abrade that burr off, which takes much longer. But I can definitely tell that the burr has gotten much smaller. Alright, the burr has gotten small enough now to where I feel like it would be safe for me to go ahead and move to the 1200 grit. So that's what I'm going to do, flip it over here, and I'm just going to do, once again, just light burr removal passes. And simultaneously try to keep working this burr off and sharpen that edge. And most likely I'm actually going to have to ultimately just strop this burr off. It's probably not going to come completely off just with stones, unfortunately. And the quick and dirty way to remove this burr would be to put a micro bevel on. But I don't think a carving knife will work very well with a micro bevel. So we're just going to have to deal with it, remove this burr the slow and painful way. And once again, this is why FlexCut tells you not to do this. But I'm terrible at listening, so. Especially when it comes to knife companies telling me what I can and can't do with my own knife. Although they know what they're talking about, that's for sure. These things are difficult to sharpen. But not impossible. Definitely making progress. That edge is looking pretty good. Definitely at sort of a cloudy finish now. Just a few more back and forth passes here. And we can go ahead and move on probably to our 1000 grit. And I should have had that soaking while I was doing this, but it should be okay. I'm going to go ahead and put it back in the water real fast just to have it soaking for when we need it here. It shouldn't need to soak for very long, but all right. Get the water off my hand there. This setup is very, like this spring steel, especially with this diamond, is probably a rust accident waiting to happen. I'm actually not sure how bad this FlexCut spring steel rusts. I haven't really had this knife out in the elements very much, so. And I don't do very much carving anymore. I used to do a lot. I used to make quite a few spoons. I still make them once in a great while. Just have not been as interested in it, but it is a very fun and relaxing thing to do. I highly recommend spoon making. It is so much fun. And this is, like I've said, this is a spoon knife. And there are other types of spoon knives, some made by Mora, some made by others. But this is I don't know how to describe it, but there's ones that look like this, and then there's ones that have like a big old flat metal hook that comes way around. It looks more like a question mark, and then it's sharpened on the top, but not on the inside of the hook. If that makes any sense. You know what? I have one. It's like 10 feet away. Let me grab it. So this is the other style of hook knife or spoon knife, and as you can see, it's just like this flat piece of metal that's hooked over, once again, spring steel. Super, well, fairly springy and bouncy, but it has a bevel up here, but then it's flat in here. And these are a little bit more useful as far as spoons. You can get a deeper bowl with this easier, but this is doable. So if this is all you got, you can make a pretty decent spoon, but having one of these really helps. And I prefer the ones that are only sharpened on one side, like over here, and like this side would be unsharpened because you can dig in there better, but without cutting yourself. But these aren't bad, so definitely pretty cool. This one is marked Eric Frost Mora, Sweden. Not sure what that means. I guess maybe it's an old brand of Mora, but yeah, pretty cool. Got it at a yard sale for like $1, I think. Alright, so we were deburring this. And I can still see the burr. It's still there, but it's very small now. So, so the main danger of leaving that burr on there is that when you go to carve, like the first few cuts you make, the wood is just going to peel that burr off there, and it's going to leave a very dull edge. So we want to try to remove that burr ourselves instead of letting the wood do it, and we can keep a much sharper edge much longer that way. And you gotta be careful with extremely fine burrs like this because they're kind of like an aluminum can. They're sharp in a nasty sort of way. It's not like an extremely good sharp polished knife where if you cut yourself with it, it's just a super clean, nice cut and it's gonna heal up really fast. With these, especially with these tiny little burrs, it's gonna leave a weird little jagged saw cut and it's gonna hurt like crazy. It's gonna be like a paper cut and it's not gonna heal very well. So avoid cutting yourself on these avoid cutting yourself on any burr, because like with an aluminum can, it's a burr that's cutting you mostly, and same with like a dull knife, you're kind of getting cut by a burr, it leaves a terrible jagged cut that takes forever to heal, and that's why paper cuts hurt so much, and take so long to heal is because they are basically like a tiny little burr or a tiny little saw that's cutting into you. And yeah, that exposes a lot of nerve, and man, it hurts. Like, I have cut myself with extremely sharp knives before. One of the worst cuts I've ever gotten was with my first Mora, my Mora Eldris. And I was carving a piece of wood, and I was working on the top of it, rounding it off, and it was a stick, and the knife slipped, and I guess I have my finger right here, and the knife went right exactly there, and went right down into that knuckle, and you can see, might be able to see in the light, a slight little crescent-shaped scar there, where it just went in. And it didn't hurt, but I knew instantly what I'd done, and smashed my finger to my leg to stop the bleeding, and went inside, and yeah, got it taken care of, but that finger was in a splint for a while, and it took a while to heal, but it didn't hurt at first. Part of it was adrenaline, part of it was the fact that it was a brand new Mora and it was ridiculously sharp, so it made the cleanest but deepest cut. And cuts like that, you'll find they do not hurt at first. It'll hurt when you rinse it out and stuff, but the actual cut doesn't hurt because everything's just been severed very cleanly. This is another one I got. Um, but Oftentimes when that happens, you will cut through muscle if it's that sharp, and man, that hurts. The muscles will start hurting and they'll cramp and stuff, and it'll just get really sore. It'll feel like someone punched you there really hard where the cut is. And yeah, not pleasant. So just don't cut yourself. And if you do, learn from it. And if you don't, carry a lot of bandages. All right. So, but I'm very thankful for all the times that I've been cut because all the times I've been cut were in very controlled circumstances and it was easy to take care of. And those times taught me how to properly handle a knife so that when the risky situations came, times when I was far from potential aid, times when I could not just run to the bathroom and run it under the sink to stop the bleeding, in times like that, I was more careful with a knife to make sure I didn't cut myself and put myself in a really bad situation. So it's best if you're going to cut yourself accidentally, it's it's really not great to cut yourself accidentally because any artificial unnecessary opening on your body is not a good thing. But I'm happy for the cuts that I've gotten because they've taught me how to be more responsible with a knife. And sometimes I forget about it and cut myself anyway. But yeah, most of the time I'm either being stupid, which is infrequently that I cut myself being stupid with a knife. More often, I am being overconfident and slightly careless. And usually it happens in this room with knives on this table that I think I have exactly under my control, and it turns out they're not under my control. I would say I am far more likely to cut myself disassembling a knife than I am actually making a cut out in the field. I'm not saying that's impossible to cut myself when I'm out working. I've seen it done, but I'm far more likely to cut myself in here in a controlled environment than out in the field. Alright, so I think the burr is pretty much gone, which is amazing. I'm very happy. I can still see a little bit of glinting on this side, but that can be worked off on the finer stones. Feels very sharp. I feel the nerves in my finger tensing up from that, just from rolling my finger over that. It feels stupid sharp. So, don't like how it feels towards the tip, but that might just be my finger becoming deadened with all of the sharpening I've done today. I think maybe I just didn't quite apex towards the tip though, but we're not going to worry about that because that's just operator error. Basically, the main idea is we've apexed most of the knife very well. I can still see the slightest little bit of burr there, but I think we've done all the damage we can do with this 1200 grit. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the Serax, and we're going to do the 1000 grit. So let me grab that real fast. Alright, so here is our 1000 grit Serax. You have to put that in there a certain way or else it won't sit right. Let's get a little more water on there. Still pretty soaked. And let's go to town. So, yep, this is the 1000 grit. And I'm just going to do, once again, light alternating passes back and forth until I see that burr pretty much completely gone. It should be, yeah, it should be pretty much completely gone at this stage. Should be even tinier at the 6000, and it should finally abrade completely off on this drop, hopefully. Now, like I was saying earlier, you're never going to completely, entirely get rid of a burr just because that's how the apex works. There's always going to be a microscopic little burr that you can never get rid of. But yeah, we're just trying to get it as small as possible to keep the edge sharp for as long as possible. Because if we have a big old burr, like I said earlier, you cut into some hardwood, anything other than like basswood, and that edge is just going to peel right off. Alright, our edge is looking extremely good now. We're getting a very good cloudy finish on both sides. Very nice even scratch pattern, and that burr is almost invisible at this point, which means we're making great progress. So basically, if you're going to sharpen one of these, I do highly recommend having a fine stone like this, a ceramic stone. Does not have to be a Cerex, could be, I don't know, King, I think, is another brand, could be a Norton. You just gotta have a really good fine stone like this, and that will really help in the fine tuning of this edge and getting that burr off. So I'm gonna wipe this off real fast. Look at what we've got. That looks very good. It needs a little more, I can tell, but and this side is looking even better. And this is very sharp. I can feel the burr is less than it was on the last step. Alright, so let's just keep working it. I'm not going to do back and forth like I did on the other knife, because the last thing I want to do is form any sort of burr on this thing. On the other one, on a regular knife, doesn't really matter, because any burr that you form you can quickly remove, whereas removing the burr is a long and complicated ordeal on this, as you all have seen. And although this video is very long, very drawn out, I think it is good because it provides a realistic expectation as to how long and tedious this process is. But I think we're almost done with this grit. I'm just going to make a few more back and forth passes. And I apologize, I've realized I haven't shown this under the microscope much. But the reason for that is because it's a very big edge. It's easy to see what's going on. I probably should have held it up to the camera a little bit more. but hopefully I've explained well enough what's going on that, yeah, I'm just trying to get this tiny little burr as abraded away as possible. And I'm actually working on the edge of the stone just a little, just to make sure I'm getting that entire edge, getting a good scratch pattern on it. Alright, let's go ahead and examine this edge a little bit. So, as you can see, we're getting a good cloudy finish. Still doesn't look absolutely perfect, but definitely much better than how we started out. And on this side, looking very good. I can still see a little ghost of a burr there on the edge, which is okay because we still have, it looks better than it did on the 1200 grit diamond, and we still have one more stone to go and then the strop. So I feel like I should be able to get this burr completely removed. This thing feels great now, better than it has in years. So I'm going to do a couple more passes on this, and then I'm going to switch right over to the 6000 grit. You alright, Joe? Okay. Alright, so we've got this almost done. Almost got that burr completely removed. Alright, let's go ahead and this looks very good. Let's go ahead and switch over to the 6000 grit. Wow, got a nice little puddle of metal there. And let's just work back and forth once more. I believe that if you want to try this, I believe an Arkansas stone will work. You'll just probably need to spend a little more time on it, but definitely for getting that initial burr. You don't want to form much of a burr, but for getting that initial burr, you'll probably want the diamond stone. You can do the entire sharpening on an Arkansas stone. It just may take a while to actually get the apex if your knife is a concrete cutting dull. Nope, scared myself there. Alright, we're almost done and my phone is running out of battery. And I cannot plug it in because I have the microphone plugged in there, so I think our burr is pretty much gone. A few more passes on this 6000 and we should be able to take it to the strop and finish removing that burr. I don't know if I said 1000 or not, but this is 6000, not 1000. Alright, so this should be pretty much all we need to do. I can still see the faintest little hint of a burr there on the edge, but I think at this point we're just going to go and go to the strop, and that should take care of the rest of it. So I'm just going to strop, trying to hold the same angle we've been holding for sharpening, maybe just the slightest bit steeper, because I think that will help to completely remove that burr. Shouldn't be rolling over the edge, I don't think. And this isn't going to look exactly like the factory edge, but I think with enough time, it could. It's just more time than I'm willing to spend on this knife that I'm probably not going to use again for a very long time. But this is an educational video, so I figured might as well make it look as good as I can right now. So it's pretty good. It's pretty shiny. I can still see some scratches, but it is very functional at this point. I mean, it is infinitely better than it was. That burr is almost completely gone. I can only see the faintest hint of it now. This knife feels absurdly sharp. So I'm just going to strop for a little bit longer, and then we'll try it out. I'm actually using a little bit more pressure right now because I just really want to try to scrape this burr off. I wouldn't use this much pressure on a regular knife, but I think that I think I'm much more worried about removing the burr than I am rounding anything over right now. I think that it's much more likely it's going to be more damaging to the knife for me to strop lightly and not totally remove the burr than for me to strop a little too heavy and remove the burr but slightly round over the apex. I'll take the slight rounding over incomplete burr removal in this case, because on this knife this is extremely difficult to get this burr off. Alright, I think that just about does it for this one. I only see the very slightest hint of a burr left. I think we're good. I think that this knife is extremely sharp. I think it's ready to carve. Let's go ahead and see how it does on some paper real fast, and then we'll try it out on some actual wood. Oh, slipped out of it there, but it is extremely sharp. It's not extremely sharp towards the tip, but that's just because I screwed up. Didn't quite apex the tip right, but the actual, most of the edge is extremely sharp. Yes. Alright, let me grab a block of wood real fast and we'll see how it does on that. Alright, so this is a block of basswood, presumably American basswood, Tilia americana, but this is very common carving wood, very soft, easy to work, and it looks good. Yeah, doing just fine here. I'm actually probably going to grab a piece of cherry as well, because cherry is my favorite fruit wood to carve. It makes really good spoons. So let me grab a piece of well-seasoned cherry real fast. Alright, so this is an old spoon. I made an old, very well-seasoned piece of cherry. I have no clue how old this spoon is, but yeah, that's not a bad curl. That's not bad at all. Probably not quite what it was like when this thing was new, but definitely not bad. I'll take that. That's a respectable curl. That'll work. Yeah, I like that. Alright, so this will get your carving knife back to usable shape. It's not perfect, it's not brand new, but with enough time on the stone, it could be made so. I can see a little bit of burr there left on the edge, but that, after all, like I said, that's why FlexCut tells you not to do this, because you run the risk of permanently burring your blade. But, I mean, with enough time, you could get that off. As far as these, different procedure just slightly, and I'm not going to do it on camera, I'm going to explain it though. These typically are not going to get so dull they need to be re-apexed. So all you're going to do, you're just going to hone these on, get off there, on, probably going to start on the 1000 and just stroke along one side and then maybe just a few times and then stroke along this side once. And you just want to try to get this side as flat as possible. You know what, I'll just demonstrate it on this. Just stroke along here just a little. You don't want to raise a burr or anything. And then on the other side, just as flat as you can get it, just one clean stroke along there. And that'll probably get you where you need to go. Feels really good and sharp. It was already sharp before, but that's just the idea. These are very difficult to sharpen. You can see what I did there. Kind of clouded it a little. But yeah, the best way to sharpen these type of knives is to never let them get dull to begin with. It's to keep them regularly stropped and maintained where you never have to sharpen them in this drastic of a manner, because bad things can happen. But that pretty much concludes it for the EdgeTime total sharpening tutorial. This video is way too long, but hopefully everyone who watches it can get something out of it. Thank you all, those of you who somehow stuck with me to the very end here. Appreciate your support. And make sure to check out my other much shorter videos. I only have one other video this long. That is my full, pretty much full restoration of a Benchmade Osborne. And yeah, most of my other videos are less than 20 minutes. So once again, thank you all for watching. Check out my other videos. And I will see you all in the next one. Have a great rest of your day.